Welcome to the Mint City Soccer Show, our World Cup Group A episode. I am your host, Matt Swift, and with me, as always, David Gussler.
I'm good, man.
David,
how are you? How are you?
Doing pretty good. As you can see if you are watching this on YouTube, we have some special guests with us. Representing the host country, Qatar, we have Becca Mitchem.
Hello.
And we also have with us on the show Greg Tosi, who is representing Ecuador. I'm taking the Netherlands. But guys, how is everybody?
Pretty good.
Good?
I'm doing all right
Rock and
tonight.
roll?
This feels like
Nice.
This feels very
All right,
like
David.
official, like CNN Crossfire. Like we got correspondents on the screen. It's going to be really good.
I'm sure we'll ruin that quick enough.
Well, David, do you want to start us off with some questions? But I guess before we do that, if you have not listened to our kickoff episode, stop this episode, go listen to that, and then come back and listen to this one. We're covering Group A tonight. Next week, we're going to be jumping into like Group B, C, D, and try to do these every single week. So stay tuned. Tonight is Group A. So David, do you want to kick us off with
Let's
some
do it, man.
questions?
Becca, I'll start with you since you're the first one in the center of the screen of our Brady Bunch here. So
Sure.
Becca, so why did you pick Qatar? Like, why did you pick them, and why did you want to cover them for this World Cup?
Sure. When they were announced as the host country, I had my reservations, as I think everyone did. This podcast kind of gave me the opportunity to dive a little bit more into, what's going on with them and what their team actually looks like.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's as we talked and touched on it a little bit, like there's been a lot of, I don't want to say controversy, but a lot of different things coming up with the host country in our kickoff episode. But it's going to be exciting to be able to have someone cover them and share what they're doing, at least on the pitch, versus everything else outside of the pitch as well, too. So
We'll cover both.
There we
We'll
go.
cover both. Don't worry.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Becca. And Greg, same question to you. So like, why did you cover the team that you were covering tonight?
Well, I asked for like Spain and Uruguay and France, but Swift said those were all taken already. So I had to go to my next tier and went with Ecuador because of the connections to Charlotte FC, really. Certainly we had Alan Franco playing here for a while. Jordi Alcivar is from Ecuador. He played, I think, one match with the team this summer. I don't know that he's going to make the final roster. And as I got more into it, I realized there are even more connections between Charlotte as well as actually Qatar, which we can talk about later. But it was really that connection here to Charlotte. Plus, after Estamos Unidos, I decided I should learn Spanish. So I've been learning Spanish since then, and I figured this was an opportunity to at least delve a little deeper and test my knowledge over the last 250 days that I've learned or so.
Well, you've stuck with it a lot more than me. I'm covering France later, and I've been on Duolingo for 7 days trying to learn some French. So we'll see how that goes. But Swift, over to you. So, like, why did you pick the team that you're doing, sir? I know you've got the little flag there in the background here a little bit later, but why did you pick the team that you're covering?
It's a team that I've always, or a country that I've always liked. I've visited there, and when I was thinking about teams to choose, I just kind of fell into them. I'm also covering Switzerland. It's just a little bit of randomness, but it also allows me to buy more jerseys because I'm like, if I'm going to represent, I got to get a jersey. So there you go. That's really the reason.
I'm glad you shared the real reason of just wanting to get another kit or have another reason to get a kit. So for those who aren't aware and haven't met Matt Swift in person, I'm pretty sure he would look like Joey from Friends if he put on every single kit that he had from that episode. So, well, awesome. Well, I know we're excited to dive in, but Matt, I'll toss it over to you to kind of kick us off as we dive into the group.
Yeah, well, the cool thing is that the host country, of course, gets to play the very first match, which will be on the 20th. And what's really cool is the two people that we have on are going head-to-head in the first match. So we got Qatar. We have Ecuador. But first, let's talk a little bit about each country, right? I'll give you guys each an opportunity to kind of, give us the details, talk about the ins and outs of the squad, anybody in particular that you want to highlight. But we have to start with the host, and that's Qatar. So, Becca, what do you have about Qatar? What you got?
Making their first World Cup appearance, we have the host country of Qatar. They, are the 2019 Asian Cup winners. They have been part of the 2021 and 2022 Gold Cups.
Gotcha.
Kind of participating on the world stage. Can't go wrong with that. Their squad is nicknamed the Maroon, which is pretty cool.
Oh.
Obviously, with the
I don't think I knew that.
You got that going on. What else? They are not anticipated to get past their group stage. I will say that. Unfortunately, there's not a lot about this squad that isn't at least riddled slightly with controversy. Over the years, Qatar has been accused of bringing in foreign players and naturalizing them to boost their squad.
In fact, FIFA had to change the rule because of Qatar, didn't they?
Exactly. For the Rio Games, they wanted to bring on 3 Brazilian players and call them naturalized citizens.
It's like the Mint City Collective 11v11 team that we're just bringing people on to help us out. So I can kind of appreciate them bringing on ringers to help them make the World Cup a little bit.
They do have one kind of standout star, Almoez Ali, who plays for one of their teams, the Al Duhail SC. He was the Golden Boot winner and part of the best 11 from this latest Gold Cup. He has 39 international goals out of 76 appearances, so not too bad.
That's not bad.
He also actually did have his mother is Sudanese, so there was a little bit of controversy, right? As he was joining the national squad.
Did you do some genealogy? That's pretty impressive.
No, this is all readily available to see. Like they don't really try to hide it.
It seems very FIFA of them to be able to be just blatantly like, yeah, this is what we're gonna do, and this is how we're gonna do it. So
yeah.
But they have been on the international stage since 1970, which was a game against Bahrain, which is one of their derby countries, really. But since then, like I said, this is their first time on the World Cup. And really, I don't think they would have qualified without being the host country. And it's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think
for the Gold Cup, they gave the U.S. a decent run for their money. Not fantastic, but at least made it difficult for them to get past last year's Gold Cup competitions.
Yeah, they're not a terrible team, really.
Yeah.
I believe they're ranked 50th right now in FIFA rankings too. And last episode we talked about betting odds. There are a couple of teams that are below them.
Yes, I did see that.
Is that just because
Australia, Tunisia, Iran? No, what are you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, is that just because of like the shadiness that is Qatar, and they're like, yeah, you know what, we're just gonna have something happen and just let the betting favorites happen that way.
We'll see how the refereeing goes.
Oh boy,
even these odds a little bit, but yeah, Australia, Tunisia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Costa Rica have worse odds than Qatar. Costa Rica is actually dead last, by the way, in odds, which I find fascinating. But
that's interesting.
There you have it. Anything else, Becca, as far as the team is concerned, or the country in general?
The team that's pretty much all that I've got for it. I did look up their coach, Felix Sanchez. He has been with the team since 2017. He's Spanish and just has moved through coaching their like under 17, under 19 groups, and then now is on the senior team. And he seems to have great pride with the guys that he's coaching. So,
good deal.
I wonder what it's like for the players playing for their country in their country, there's definitely got to be some, pride and some nerves. And I would imagine some type of expectation that you have to do good here. And I also wonder how they're feeling with some of the controversy. I'm sure that has to play on their minds too. So it's a very interesting dynamic with that team. I'm very curious to see how they handle kind of all that pressure in this tournament. And, they're playing that first game, so we'll know pretty quickly what's going to happen.
Very early on what's going to go on with them in the group.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about what we think the outcomes and everything will be here in a second. But let's throw it over to Greg, who has Ecuador and has Alan Franco on this team. Charlotte FC, great.
Thunder Swift.
But yeah, let's talk about Ecuador.
All right. Well, Ecuador, just for kind of background, is a country in South America. It is on the west coast of South America. It is one of the smaller countries in South America. It has a population around 13 million. They started with their Federation of Football back in 1899, but have never really been a player in CONMEBOL or anywhere else, typically really at all until just recently. They were invited to go to the first World Cup in 1950, but they declined due to travel costs and otherwise. After they declined, it took them another 62 years to make it back. I'm sorry, 52. My math was off. 52 years. They made it back in 2002 was their first appearance ever in the World Cup. Their team, again, I said that they have not had much, the fighting against Argentina, Brazil, even Colombia, Uruguay, Paraguay. But about the 1980s, there's a fellow by the name, of Dusan Draskovic, who they consider basically to be the father of modern soccer in Ecuador. He came over in 1988 and essentially revolutionized the game. He had some European ideas, brought those in, and really the success that we're seeing with Ecuador today can be traced back to that. There's been a couple other revolutions or evolutions of the sport there over the years, but it's really been that last 40 years or so that has really seen Ecuador kind of improve. And they've improved so much, in fact, that they only finished behind Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay in CONMEBOL qualifying. So they were kind of a surprise finishing there. They got the last automatic spot for the World Cup and did fairly well in qualifying. They did lose to Brazil and Argentina, but they also drew them at home, both teams at home. So they had a pretty good qualifying. I think they were 7, 5, and 6 for their 18 matches in CONMEBOL. So they have been there before, like I said, 2002 and 06 was their best year. They made it out of the group and then lost to jolly old England 1-0. So that's, we may see that again, certainly in the group if they get out. But there's also some other similarities with the U.S. men's national team. Back in 2018, they had made 3 successive World Cups, and then they failed to qualify in 2018. I don't know if that sounds familiar to USMNT fans, but something like that happened. And at the time, they were relying heavily on older talent, and they decided that really wasn't cutting it. And they kind of changed their approach. Their current coach came on in 2020 during the pandemic and brought in a lot of young players from actually Independiente del Valle, which you Charlotte FC fans may recognize as a team that MAR coached prior to coming to Charlotte. Not immediately, but sometime prior to. And we can get into that a little bit more later, but he actually had a somewhat starring role in kind of getting this team to where it is now as far as being able to play in a World Cup and having some exciting players to put forth at the World Cup. So I'm happy to keep talking, but I don't want to monopolize. So if there's questions or other stuff we want to get into, that's fine.
I was just say you kind of rub salt in the wound a little bit with the aging players of the last cycle not qualifying. Yeah. So, like, as a U.S. fan and someone that's going to have to cover the team, I'm like, man, this is like deja vu a little bit. So,
yeah, it was shockingly similar when I actually kind of started looking at the history of it and what they have, and they've got some older players on there now, but they're what they did, and this is actually the Qatar tie-in, is back in 2007, Independiente del Valle was bought, changed hands, and the owner decided to invest and decided to make this, what was a fairly small team outside of Quito, Ecuador, into a major player in the Ecuadorian league and otherwise in South America. In fact, they just won both the they won the Ecuadorian league as well as the not the Copa Sudamericana, that was the other one. But they've done very well in recent years. They started to build academies throughout the country, places for people to come to. They really started recruiting youth players. And about that time, they actually consulted with Qatar on how they were bringing players in. And I don't know how much you looked into it, Becca, but there's the Aspire Academy, which I'm not terribly familiar with, but that was Qatar's essentially kind of catch basin to bring in as many folks as they could to start training them up. Good academies, good facilities, good nutrition, all that good stuff. So they consulted with them and really kind of increased the quality of the players that they were producing. And these are players from Ecuador, players that they've actually been able to grow in their system. MAR went from Aspire in 2018. He was there for 6 years, I believe, with Aspire, and became the manager of Independiente del Valle's academy in 2018. Managed their academy team for about a year, and then took over the head job in May of 2019. And actually only had that job for a short period of time, only had it through December of that year. So actually, I'm sorry, it was December of 2020. But so he was there and helped develop some of those players that are coming up into the leagues. And what they've done is kind of similar to where MLS is now, as far as they're trying to grow players and sell them to Europe to get the big bucks so that they can reinvest back into Ecuador, back into their facilities and that. And they've been doing fairly well with that. And just to name a couple of the players that we may know, certainly from this past weekend, Jose Cifuentes is Ecuadorian. He was a midfielder for LAFC, did very well in the MLS Cup match. And from what I've heard, which is very anecdotal, but all the pundits seem to be saying that it's likely he's going to get an offer from Europe very quickly and move over there. Another person who has bothered Charlotte FC is Leonardo Campagna with Inter Miami. Was it Wolves, was loaned to Inter Miami, and I think is now there permanently, so we have to see him twice a year. 6'2" striker who's, I believe, 22 years of age and generally causes problems up at the front of the line. Is a difficult person to deal with, so he's another one of those characters that's come up through and really made a mark. But I think their shooting star, their number one right now, is a fellow by the name of Moisex. He plays with Brighton. He's 21 years old, and by all accounts, he is a true box-to-box midfielder that can do everything. He's good on offense, getting that pass out. He's good on defense, tracking back, making sure he can defend. And so he just transferred there this year, I believe. But he's not alone. He actually has two other Ecuadorians who are playing with him. There's Purvis Estupinan, who is a left fullback for them, as well as Jeremy Sarmiento, who's basically a number 10 with Brighton, plays their attacking midfield. So there's three Ecuadorians right on that team. They have also, there's a fella by the name of Piero Hincapi, who's at Bayern Leverkusen, center back who is, best I can tell, somewhat in the mold of Guzman Corujo, in that he's not afraid to push up into the midfield. He's not afraid to kind of advance the ball, look offensively to make something happen. So it's been a number of those players. And, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Alan Franco and Jordi Alcivar from the same thing. Alan Franco's 24, Jordi's 21. Like I said, I don't know that Yordi has had many minutes with their national team yet. I know I did see him play one match with them over the summer. But Alan Franco is definitely projected to be on the roster for Qatar. So some folks that we've seen here right in Bank of America Stadium. So it sounds as though the team's on the upswing. It sounds as though they're in a good place. It sounds as though, again, similar to the U.S. men's national team, that they are relying on youth to kind of bring the program forward, to kind of build up their domestic league, like similar to what MLS is doing. And they're seeing results. And again, we can talk a little bit more about what their odds are, but their odds are slightly better, I think, than Qatar's. They're ranked 44 by FIFA right now. But I think there's a little more optimism with them because of their youth and because of their technical ability. They don't have much experience, so I don't know if the big stage is going to be difficult for them to handle. But I guess the other side of that is they're young and don't know any better, and they just play just as well. Because the average age of their team is about the same as the average age of the U.S. It's right around 25 years, which is one of the younger teams. So there were a lot of parallels between that team and their players that are going over there to compete.
It's interesting that you kind of brought up the MAR tie-in because as Matt Swift knows, I like to follow players and coaches from Charlotte FC on Instagram. And MAR actually posted a story the other day of him highlighting some of the Qatar players. And now I see the correlation. I was actually wondering if he coached or was part of their, coaching system, whatever it was. But now that you think you said Inspire or Aspire was the academy. And now it makes sense that some of those guys that he probably coached there and that academy is now on the national team. So it's definitely interesting to see.
Yeah, and Moisex Caicedo, who also has some nicknames. He's called Nino Moy, which is apparently what he prefers to be called. But also the English have named him Moisex because his playing is so pleasurable to watch, apparently, that is what they have dubbed him. But he had remarked that while playing under MAR, he'd gotten a little more freedom to move around. He doesn't have as much freedom in Brighton. But MAR kind of gave him the confidence to rove around the midfield and ask for the ball. That really helped with him there. So interestingly, or not maybe, but all of the accounts of what MAR did in Ecuador have been glowing. So it's been interesting kind of seeing that side of it as opposed to his most recent.
What was that player called again? Just to make sure I'm understanding.
His name is Moisex Caicedo, but they call him Moisex Caicedo, I guess. It's the witty English. Those are faulty towers and the like. So that's what they've.
That damn Matt Chantry. So okay, you're good.
I love it. And as far as odds go, they're kind of far down on the list, but they're right above Canada and Wales. They're right under U.S. and Poland as far as odds are concerned. If you talk to Han Solo, he doesn't care about the odds.
Right, because I said Canada's going to win it, so that's why I'm like,
yeah.
Take.
It's a very bold take, David. You should probably bet on that. You could probably win more money than the Mega Powerball, $1 billion winner out in California. It's funny you talked about them missing out on the 2018 World Cup, and we talked about the U.S., but one of the fascinating things is the Netherlands also missed out on that World Cup.
Really?
Also because their team was aging out. So it kind of puts things in perspective. I know as fans here in the U.S., it was a big step back, right? Can't sugarcoat it, but there are those cycles too, and you do have players that are going to age out, and you have to kind of watch as a program, like, is this about to happen? What can we do? Maybe we don't bring some of these older players. Maybe we bite the bullet and bring somebody younger, to give them experience. But yeah, I found that was pretty fascinating too, that Ecuador and the Netherlands missed out on this last World Cup. And it was, from what you were saying, and it was really because of players aging out. So that's pretty cool. So as far as that first game is concerned, Becca, you don't have high hopes that Qatar is going to win that first game, or do you?
I do not. So I'm a correspondent,
There you go.
not a fan.
That's right. I'm just stating the facts here.
Right.
They had a friendly today with Albania. It's I think
Oh, okay.
their last kind of hurrah before the cup. They won 1-0
Okay.
with a PK. With Mr. Ali taking the PK and making it. So that's good. I just don't know that they have kind of that motion on the field to create the momentum, like to get into goals that aren't necessarily set pieces or in some ways given to them.
Yeah, and again, I go back. I wonder how much nerves are going to play an issue too, playing in front of your home fans. It could help, but it could go the other way. I think about Brazil. I think last time they hosted, right? I think it was such a big thing for them. I think the moment kind of got away from them a little bit, especially towards the end there, because you could all tell they were very emotional. They were crying during the anthem, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think there's a lot of emotion being the host country, and sometimes it can work to your benefit. But that's a lot to overcome, especially when you're not that strong of a side, right? And there's all these expectations. You don't want to look bad. But so we'll see how that goes in the first game. Greg, are you pretty confident about that first match of them pulling that through?
I mean, as confident as I can be, which is to say, not super confident, but also not like sitting on the fence. It seems as though Ecuador has the talent to be able to even just out-talent Qatar. But also the way that they play is something that I imagine Qatar is going to do a lot of sitting in the low block. They're going to compress. They're going to try to be compact in the back, absorb pressure, look to counterattack. Frankly, the U.S. has done at times. But that's kind of what I understand their tactics to be. Tactically, we have some different formations that Ecuador uses, mainly the 4-4-2, but they use 4-2-3-1 as well as an experiment to some with the 4-3-3. And the main thing there is their fullbacks. They tend to almost invert, or they have space where the midfielders will and the wings will actually invert to allow them to come up. And so they have a way of kind of unlocking defenses. That's just with their wingers. They then have Moisex in the middle, as well as the others that can then connect through the middle.
Are you referring to Moisex?
Yes, that's the one.
Moisex.
Are they going to
Moisex? It's kind of got
Moisex.
that yeah,
Moisex.
It's almost like that other word people don't often like hearing.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think that they'll be able to connect through the middle and really get their wings to kind of bomb in some crosses if need be, if it's not working through the middle. So it's a situation where Qatar may be both strategically at a disadvantage and also at a kind of talent disadvantage. That said, the way that Ecuador plays does leave them very open to a counter because they will have their fullbacks high. They may have some of their other players pressing high. But from what I've read, they basically just rely on Moisex to get back and cover. He just is apparently a beast and covers a lot of ground. And they kind of rely on that attribute to help them slow down the ball through the middle on those counters.
We definitely found the name of the episode.
That, and we found out who's going to be like the man of the tournament that we're going to watch, because we're just going to be like, that's the guy. That's the one.
That's the guy. And I think that they're at plus 118 versus Qatar, I think, on the actual money line. So, and I think Qatar's plus 144 is super close right in there. But I would be, given this the first night, given that Ecuador kind of, again, that same momentum from not being there 4 years ago, really wanted to make a good show, really wanted to kind of put on the world stage. And actually, I'm going to reference him again, but Moisex did an interview talking about how he wants to bring Ecuadorian football to the world stage, to really kind of introduce the world to Ecuadorian football and have everyone talking about that football. So I think they'll be jazzed and ready to go. And as you said, Swift, I don't know if the pressure there for Qatar might also play a factor, but I think even in a straight match, Ecuador's got a good chance of getting 3 points from that, which puts them in a pretty good position to get out of the group, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that first game, if Ecuador, even Qatar can get those early 3 points, I think, I'll talk about Netherlands here in a minute, and they're the group favorites. Senegal's good, but I think if especially Ecuador can get those 3 points off the bat, it really, really sets them up for success in the group and can hopefully get them out of there.
So I was doing some quick hard-hitting research while you guys were sharing that, but if you actually go back to the last time these two teams played, Qatar and Ecuador, was a scrimmage in 2018, and Qatar actually won 4-3. So we'll see if they can bring some magic there to the first match. But
I mean, I will point out that that's the team that didn't make it to the 2018 World Cup.
That's true. That's true.
I don't know if that has any bearing on this or not, but it's
all right.
Just a
fact. So old team, and then they didn't have Moisex.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, he would have been 17 at the time ish.
Probably not having any sex then. But
I don't know. Judge people on their age.
We'll see.
Well, on that note, this is a great episode.
It's a great episode.
Well, right.
Good night.
So on that note, Swift, we're going to transition to the Netherlands, who I know have their first match against Senegal. But Matt, so tell us a little bit about the Netherlands. Like, what do they do? Like, what are their FIFA rankings? What are their odds? What do you expect to see from them in this group stage?
Now, are the Netherlands also the Dutch?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that wear the orange?
Yes.
That is correct. Yeah. Well, so hold on a second. Your Twitter handle is Orange Goats, right?
Yes,
so
that is correct.
What is that?
Well, this is moderately embarrassing. I actually was talking. I was talking with Krakauer and Lloyd Sam at an Independence game, and Lloyd asked me the same question. He's like, "We see you on there. What is that? What's that come from?" And I said, "Well, orange is my favorite color, and goats are my favorite animal.
Orange goats.
That's it."
That's
and he's
so
like, "That's it." I said,
That's it.
"Yes, that's it." So it's not an exciting story, and but I've kind of adopted it as added the to make it seem more important, and I wanted to put the S on the goats because I didn't want to be like I'm a goat, like the greatest of all time. It was actually, it's a reference to the animal. So that's why it's plural for goats to kind of differentiate. But yeah, that's where that comes from. Orange is my favorite color. I love the Dutch uniforms usually. I'm not a huge fan of what Nike did this year, but
yeah. I'm not a fan of what any team has done with their jerseys. It's going to be a very ugly World Cup when it comes to that. But as far as the Netherlands is concerned, I believe they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think they're 7th in like odds. They're right under Germany right now. They missed out, like I was saying, they missed out on 2018. Again, some of their players were aging out. They've made it to 3 World Cup finals in the past, but they've yet to win it all. They're currently 8th in the FIFA rankings. They play like a high pressing, kind of fluid type of football where they'll kind of rotate positions in and out. It's very fluid. They typically will run like a 4-3-3, but in like Nations League, they were kind of switching to like a 3-4-1-2. They'll play like 3 in the back, but then they'll have like wing backs and stuff too. And like I said, it's kind of like a dynamic team in that regard. Some of the players you may know, Virgil van Dijk plays for Liverpool. Ake, who's a defender, he plays for Manchester City. We got Blind, who plays for Ajax or Ajax, however David likes to.
I was waiting for it.
He'll never live it down.
Never.
No.
You got Memphis Depay. So I mean, you got some big time names. They're pretty. I feel like they're a pretty deep team. Their issues have not been scoring at all. I've got some stats here. I think they scored 33 goals in qualifying, which I think was like second or third most in all of qualifying. 14 in Nations League. Again, I think it was like third. So yeah, scoring hasn't been an issue. I guess if they have a weakness, it's keeping clean sheets. There's some like goalkeeper issues. A little bit. It kind of reminds me of like the U.S. men's national team. There's not some one person that's like locked it completely down. They're not entirely sure who may start. So a lot of similarities to the U.S. in that regard. But I feel like they're definitely favorites to get out of their group. That first game is against Senegal. I feel a little bit better about that match now that Sadio Mane is injured, unfortunately. Yeah. One of like 15,000 players that are injured for this World Cup. I was looking forward to watching Mane play for Senegal. Yeah. But we'll see how it goes. I think that first game is the one that most concerns me about them, and I think if they can get past that, they won't have any issues getting to the next round. I think what's going to be interesting is, of course, to get past that first one, and then when they play Ecuador, to see how that's gonna go. We'll see.
You mentioned their play style was kind of fluid, and they've come out of positions here and there, and those kind of things, right? But I don't know if you got a chance to look it up, Swift, but the Dutch national team in 1974 had a very famous tactic where it was called total football style, and they would literally swarm the ball. If the ball was like at midfield, like 6 or 7 players would swarm the ball. They would just, positions, it's not a thing. We're just all going to attack the same player. And like I was reading an article about it. It said like they would refer to them as a pack of hyenas, literally attacking the ball, right? And so, it's interesting you say that because I really would hope that they would bring that tactic back this year, but I don't think they're going to do that, will they?
There you go. The Dutch are pretty innovative folks, I feel like. Always trying new things, I guess.
It's definitely interesting. I mean, obviously that was revolutionary at the time, but I don't know if it would work very well in today's game. But I would still love to see it somewhere.
I would love to hear commentators try to figure that one out.
Yeah. What's interesting about this group too is whoever wins this group or finishes second could possibly play the U.S. in the knockout stages. So we'll see. Hopefully, the U.S. will do well. But I thought that was pretty interesting too. When I was kind of running some scenarios, I think I had the Netherlands playing the U.S. in the knockout rounds. But again, it just depends on
running scenarios. Does that just mean playing FIFA, or is
that's exactly what that means.
I'm glad you asked that question, Greg, because I was imagining him having like the board in the back with the yarn with the string going from team to team, and he's like plotting it out. But yeah, right.
Just do that. No, it is funny. So FIFA 23 they came out with the World Cup mode, and I played with the U.S. for a little bit, but I stopped and actually played with the Netherlands because I wanted to get a kind of a better feel of where everybody was. I wanted to see who they had on the bench and everything like that, and I thought that was kind of neat. And another thing, I'm going to kind of make fun of myself. Another cool thing that I've been doing. I don't know if people have been collecting the Panini World Cup stickers.
Yes.
And I've actually learned a lot about teams that I typically don't follow at all. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that person plays for that country and everything like that. So, if you're collecting these, I think it's a great way to learn about different teams. And one of the things about this show that I wanted to do is, Becca, you're not hoping Qatar wins it all, right? I mean, I don't think you are. And same with you, Greg. Like, I don't think you think Ecuador is going to win it all, but it's kind of cool to take a team, learn about them, talk about them, and it is kind of like a little model UN. I think it's pretty neat. David, any other questions you can?
What are the odds for them in this? I know we share the odds for Ecuador and Qatar, but what are the odds for the Dutch in this World Cup?
I don't have the exact odds. They are right under Germany and right above Portugal, and kind of
above Portugal.
Yeah, so it's to go through the list. It's Brazil, Argentina, France, England, Spain, Germany. Becca, you're covering Germany too, right?
I sure am.
That's right.
I'll have a much different tone for that one.
Less disdain for Germany. Germany, and then the Netherlands after that. So I mean, I think depending on who they play in the knockouts, I think they could get pretty far.
I was gonna say, I think just from a projection perspective, I think most people are expecting the Dutch to move out of this group stage pretty easily based off who they're playing here, and that should help them, right? I mean, the group stage is usually, if you look at the U.S., that's a pretty tough group stage for them, and then if you look at the Dutch here, I think they kind of got the luck of the draw a little bit per se with Senegal and Ecuador and Qatar in this one.
If you look at this group, it seems to be pretty cut and dry. Again, though, like, I'd like to see how the Dutch handle we're the favorites. We're supposed to win the group. Let's see how they do in that first game. It's a shame that Sadio Mane is not going to be playing for Senegal. So we'll just have to kind of see how that all shakes out. But I think that they'll top the group. But who's going to finish second? I think it was supposed to be Senegal, but now who knows? Not that Senegal can't do well without Sadio Mane, but he's a pretty good player.
What do you think? Not to put you on the spot, Swift, and I'll ask Becca and Greg the same question, but Matt, so the first game for the Dutch is against Senegal. So what do you think the score is going to be for the very first game for them in the World Cup?
I think 2-1. Again, I think they have a hard time keeping clean sheets. I think Senegal's speed might shock them. I could see Senegal actually scoring first, and then Netherlands have to work their way back into it and ultimately win. But I could see that. Nice. That
nice.
2-1.
And Becca, what about you? So with Qatar, and actually, I meant to ask you this earlier, Becca, but is it Qatar or is it Qatar? Because I've heard both. But I just was curious.
So, there's the definitive answer is that the consonant sounds for the name of Qatar are not easily replicated with our alphabet. But it is most certainly not Qatar.
Just making,
I've heard a lot of people call it that. I've heard pundits. Same. When I was learning about the Middle East, like, a lot of people default to Qatar, but like I said, it's not very. It's a lot of different consonant sounds in the Arabic language. As for the score, I think it'll be a patented Matt Swift flippity flop from the last time that Qatar and Ecuador saw each other. So, I'll say they're gonna lose 3-4. They'll make a good showing, I think. I don't know that they will let themselves be humiliated on such a grand stage. Will the referees let them get embarrassed? That's
a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing.
Well, same question over to you, Greg. So you and Becca are kind of competing against each other here, but what do you expect the first score to be for Ecuador in their first match?
Well, I guess I'll do it backwards. I expect Qatar to get a goal. First World Cup, at home, first match, they're going to get a goal. I think Ecuador, again, certainly has a talent. But it's going to be that first match. People could still be tight, not quite into the flow of things. I think it'll be a 2-1 win for Ecuador. Again, not getting overly embarrassed by Qatar, or rather Qatar getting embarrassed by them, having Qatar stay in it. But I think on balance that Ecuador will be able to find the back of the net twice to push them through and get the 3 points out of that first match.
So, you guys are both saying like that's going to be actually the first match of this World Cup, and not to celebrate Qatar's, building of stadiums or anything like that, because there's a lot of controversy with them building stadiums for this event. Matt Swift famously put out the image earlier today on our Slack about the shipping container hotel rooms that people are paying $200 a night to stay in, which is about half the size my office is right now. But the stadium that they're going to be playing in was actually built in 2000. I guess started in 2015, and it's a 60,000 capacity stadium. So I'm sure it's going to be sold out for that first game. It's going to be a show, just like any other World Cup. I don't think they'll have like Shakira come out or anything like that and have an anthem that perspective. But you're right, Swift. I think Qatar is going to have some kind of I don't say angst, but maybe nerves or angst is probably the best way to put it. Just with playing in front of 60,000 people, there's going to be a lot of pressure from their local government to do well. You got to feel for those players a little bit, just from the putting themselves on the stage there a little bit from that perspective.
Yeah, I'm sure for them it's going to be awkward for them. I don't know how they feel politically, culturally, or anything like that. I won't speak to that because I don't know. But it's Qatar shouldn't have received this World Cup. I think Sepp Blatter of all people of today was like, "Oh yeah, the U.S. should have got it." Well, no shit. Should got it.
After I got all my bribe money and I spent it all, now I'll come out and say that that happens a week before it kickoff. That's fine,
Right.
Yeah. So,
I would be remiss to not talk about one last thing as far as Qatar goes.
Yeah.
Like you said, they've been building since they got that bid in 2010. So some of the countries in the Middle East rely on a labor system called kafala. This is a sponsorship system where migrant workers can come to the country with a sponsor, and it gets exploited to the most extreme degrees. These sponsors will sometimes hold these workers' passports hostage. Until very recently, they had to have their sponsor sign off on a visa to exit the country. There are 1.2 million foreign workers in Qatar, made up of migrants from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. This makes up 94% of Qatar's labor force.
jeez.
Now, every day we hear some outrageous story coming from Qatar of how much work has been put into this, how many people are suffering because of this. We get the large estimates of tens of thousands, if not more. The official death count for the World Cup is 3. 3 people, according to the Qatari government, have died actively working on this construction. And I think it's a real shame that, in a couple of weeks, some people will just file that away and celebrate this tournament where it really should not be happening.
Yeah, no, that's thanks for giving us that info.
I don't mean to be,
but it's the reality.
That's
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of the shadow over this whole tournament. And when things like this could be good for countries, but I feel like when they're trying to figure out where a World Cup should be, like the U.S. makes sense because we already have the stadiums. They have the proper capacity. We have airports. We have the infrastructure where we don't have to build things and like force labor and do all these drastic things. And some of these countries that are not prepared for that, they want it so bad, they bribe people, and then they have to build these brand new stadiums, and it's almost like it's forced labor. And to your point, Becca, like they're holding their visas, they're holding these passports until they're done working. Then you can have it back, or you can do whatever. It's sad, and it's definitely got to be a point where FIFA has to stop allowing these countries to get it to. I feel like they're instigating all this extra stuff that's going on. I mean, like, maybe they could do something like what we're about to do with like Mexico, US, Canada. Yeah. Maybe a smaller nation can, help out another bigger country to host or something like that. Maybe it's just one stadium instead of 8 or 10, or whatever craziness. Like one stadium's that's manageable. But it's a shame that it's happening. And again, it's kind of a dark cloud over the whole entire tournament. It's
well, and it doesn't help things either with FIFA's history. We touched on it last episode, just really FIFA's track record of not really making.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't the first country that has bought their way into hosting. And unfortunately it probably won't be the last.
I think you can even look at this at the Olympics. The Olympics is very similar sometimes. Like China had the same situation just come up, right? And so, and I touched on it in Slack a few times, but it's all driven by money. you can bribe your way to host it, but FIFA's also doing it for sponsorship, for awareness. It's the world's game. It's going to bring awareness throughout, right? But until big name players sit out and don't play, it's going to continue to happen because FIFA has the power and they know that these players have such small windows and they can only play essentially 2 to 3 World Cups. It's not going to change until that happens, right? And so it'll be interesting to see what happens during this World Cup, because I know Becca, you're covering Germany, and Bundesliga and a lot of the German teams have already been very vocal about what this World Cup means to them. So I don't want to steal your thunder, and I'll wait for that episode. But it's definitely a shame, and it's unacceptable that a country and people are treating human beings like that.
Yeah, it also too is going to take people that are in power like that to not abuse it. So I think one of the deals with this Qatar getting the World Cup was, I think if I read this right, the French representative was telling people to vote for Qatar. Then later on, Qatar buys fighter jets from France. So it's going to take a huge overhaul, but people that are in these positions can't be doing things like that. This is like almost like a world government, right? FIFA's like its own government. So it's just insane, the stuff that goes on. And you would think in 2022 it would be getting better, and maybe with Sepp Blatter leaving and maybe some of these other people getting found out, it will. But it's almost like it's gotten worse past couple of World Cups. So
there's going to be a breaking point. Yeah, kind of like what David said. Like there has to be something that either happens or a line is drawn. Something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was that Women's World Cup player, right? Anna Hedberg. I'm probably butchering her name, but she did sit out a World Cup in her prime as a protest about, I believe it was equal pay and things of that nature. But she did. It drew a lot of attention to her cause, and it did, kind of facilitate some change. But she lost that window. So she had an 8-year period where she didn't play. And that's a tough decision, I think, for a lot of these players to make. And I'm trying to personally with this World Cup separate the fanfare and the production of it from the players and the games.
Mm-hmm.
The players didn't ask for it to be in Qatar. They didn't have a choice over where it was. I mean, some of these players maybe weren't even double-digit age when Qatar was awarded this World Cup. And they've been working hard all their lives trying to compete and get to this level. So I think Vaughn mentioned it the other day too, that he's trying to make sure that none of his dollars go to support Qatar, the World Cup event itself. But that he is still, watching the players, watching how how they are. And it is a big deal, certainly, to play on that grandest stage. So kind of watching it for, just for the players and trying to not ignore, but not let that dampen what the players are doing. Not let all this other kind of nastiness that's going on put too much of a shadow on the players and their effort and their attempts to win that World Cup. And for what it's worth, in my research, I found that Ecuador was taking no position on anything going on in Qatar, so they are staying right out of the conversation on that. They don't expect any protests from players, no statements from anyone. They seem to just kind of want to be flying low. I assume, this is a pure assumption, but their prior connection with them, they probably don't want that drug up too much. So I think that may be why they're just kind of staying quiet.
Yeah, I think it's going to take for a change. I think it's going to take some of the federations like Germany saying we're not going. But it can't just be.
It can't just be one country.
I think it's too big for like one player. Right, one country. It can't be one player. You can easily move on for that.
UEFA itself said we're not sending any countries.
Well, I think. That's it. Look at what when FIFA was exploring having a 2-year World Cup every other year, right? UEFA came out and said no, we're not going to support that. We're not going to do that. The players were like, no, we're not going to play. And guess what happened? It didn't really move forward from at this point, right? Obviously, there's still a back channel conversation. I'm sure it's happening because, advertising dollars talk, unfortunately. But you kind of had that die in the water a little bit, right? I think it's going to come to that, like you said, like a federation of UEFA and CONCACAF, whatever it is. If they come out and say that, yeah, that's going to be a big deal.
So, Greg, not to put you on the spot, but Ecuador was in a little bit of hot water. They had a little bit of a scandal.
I am glad you brought that up because that is actually very current, and I'll explain why. The issue arose. There's a player who actually plays right back for Ecuador by the name of Byron Castillo. And apparently for a good period of time, I want to say somewhere around 6 to 7 years, there have been questions about the legitimacy of his Ecuadorian citizenship. It's been alleged that he was born in Colombia, that he wasn't actually born in Ecuador. And so there have been these questions for a while, to the point where Ecuador actually held him out of matches while they were trying to get it sorted out and kind of figure out what went on. Back in 2021, the Ecuadorian government decided, you know what, he's a citizen. It's not residence-based. To reference Qatar, they had to change the rule. And so he's going to be eligible to play for our team. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Ecuador surprised some of the other powers in South America, such as Colombia, Chile, and Peru, by finishing fourth. So in May of this year, 2022, the Chilean Football Federation filed a complaint with FIFA.
That's right.
Saying Mr. Castillo isn't eligible to play. That means that Ecuador must forfeit all the games in which he played. I believe it was 8 matches in qualifying. Therefore, they lose all those points, and we should get to move up into that spot. Now, I'm not going to get too much into it, but there's some talk that Italy might get the spot because they're the next highest qualifying. I don't know what all the repercussions of that would have been. But essentially, it started with Chile saying, hey, stop cheating. What's up? Yeah. So that was filed in May. It was heard in June by FIFA. FIFA basically said, we don't care, go home.
We love scandals and shit like this.
Right.
Are you kidding me?
Put it in the book.
FIFA's all about covering stuff up or not. Yeah, whatever. It's fine. So then Chile and Peru actually both kind of joined together and filed it to the FIFA Appeals Board, which also got them nowhere. That was in September of this year. And the whole time, the potential for Ecuador being removed from the World Cup is on the table. So that was, I believe, September 25th, I think, that ruling was issued from the appeals panel.
Mm-hmm.
Undeterred, Peru and Chile then took it to something I just learned about the other day called the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is in Lausanne, Switzerland.
Of course it's in Switzerland. Of course it is.
Of course it's in Switzerland, right?
Neutral.
So it's, and it is exactly what it sounds. It's not a legal, as far as a full court of law, but it is an arbitration system. So I don't know how familiar you are with arbitration, but basically both parties have to agree that whatever the arbiters find is what will happen, and they agree to it. So it's generally considered a more efficient way of handling something than a lawsuit. So they applied for this in September, like 2 months ago. And the CAS said, okay, we'll hear it. We will hear the parties on this on November 4th and November 5th. So that was last week that they came in to do their arguments. And again, as of last week, which was basically 2 weeks prior to the World Cup, this is still on the table that Ecuador could be removed from the World Cup. Fortunately, I was a little worried doing my research that I wasn't going to have an answer for this podcast, but fortunately, they were watching out for me, and they made a ruling yesterday. So November 8th, 12 days before Ecuador is supposed to compete in the World Cup, they finally settled this. And it seems that the initial thought that FIFA may have just been sweeping stuff under the rug may have been somewhat accurate, but they considered a lot of things. And one of the things that they considered was kind of how Ecuador had behaved mostly as far as trying to figure this out, trying to sort out where he's from, and then actually having recognized him as an Ecuadorian citizen, which according to FIFA's rules, if the government of a particular country recognizes that person as a citizen, then they're a citizen. So they get that citizenship. So they said, Ecuador, you can play in 2022. That's fine. We get it. But you didn't have entirely clean hands. They essentially relied on some documents that may have been fraudulent. Mr. Castillo was, in fact, born in Colombia and was brought across at a young age by some businessmen. It's a little convoluted, but they also, some of the information on his passport was apparently falsified. And they said, since I believe it was Article 21 that governed the first part about them being able to play in the World Cup. Article 22 governed the, maybe it was vice versa, but basically governed the use of the documents. And the court said, you did kind of mess up on that. So we're docking you 3 points in the 2026 qualification process.
Ooh.
So they go in at -3 to 2026. And they have to pay 100,000 Swiss francs, which is only like $100,000. I think you get $9 million to finish last in the World Cup, so not a huge fine. But they did issue that yesterday, and so it was a little bit like they try to use FIFA's rules as much as possible. So they look at what the actual text is, they look at what FIFA's rules are, and then try to apply that as they come. It's a 3-arbiter panel. Each side picks one, and then those 2 arbiters pick who will be like the leader of the group. So it seems to be a fair process. When I was kind of trolling around their website, there's a bunch of other stuff that was on there. I believe they handled a case in April about Salzburg. I think there's an issue with a player there, and they've done. I mean, they do all the sports apparently. So, but it was some intrigue right to the last minute for Ecuador. I think Ecuador was playing it cool, like there's really no issue. We're going to go. It's not a problem. I don't know how worried they were internally. I think they may have been a little surprised by the outcome and not terribly pleased. That said, the World Cup expands to 48 teams in 2026. So there's going to be 6 automatic qualifiers from CONMEBOL. I don't know how much those 3 points are going to really seriously negatively impact them, but at least it was something to kind of say, look, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good. So you do have at least a consequence for it in that way. So Chile and Peru are not going to be in the World Cup this year. They'll have to get in on their bona fides next time around. But yeah, so that was interesting that was, like I said, in play up until really yesterday. that Ecuador might have not been in the World Cup, because whatever this group decided was going to be it. So if they said, no, you cheated, those games are ineligible, they would have had to put someone else in. So, which has happened in the past, apparently. So this wouldn't have been unprecedented. There have been other situations where that has happened. So they were maybe a little nervous, but they pulled through, and we'll get to see them play Qatar.
Well, this entire time, Sean McIntosh is sitting here breaking a pencil in his fist and shaking his fist because of this ruling, Italy is not playing in the World Cup.
Right.
So,
and Sean, if you're listening, to everyone else, I don't really think Italy
no, I don't think
a chance of getting in. I think that was some rumor that they started to maybe get
into existence.
I mean, because it was basically like
it would be Chile,
like right. If and actually it may have been Peru, because what would have happened is they would have taken the points away from all the games that they played in for all the teams they played against, and so that would have meant that Peru actually had a higher point total than Chile. So that would have been even doubly insulting for Chile there. But yeah, it was going to be another team for CONMEBOL. They weren't going to put a UEFA team into a CONMEBOL spot. And so, I mean, that was, I mean, as much as, again, the Italians may have wanted to will that into existence, that just was not what was going to happen based on my reading. And now we may never find out, but I don't think that was going to happen.
I feel left out. I feel like my team needs to have a scandal or something bad. I have to dig some
they could
dirt
just
up.
be good people and
maybe
do the right thing.
Their scandal is they're not bringing the orange kits this go round. So that's the scandal for them. So it is really
That's
a shame.
Yeah. Speaking of kits, I did want to touch briefly on Ecuador's. They're nothing particularly fancy. The home kit is yellow. They're actually known as La Tree, based on the yellow, red, and blue of their flag, not El Tree, which is Mexico. They have the yellow top, blue shorts, red socks for their primary home kit. Their away kit, I think, is quite tasteful this year. It's a nice navy blue color. It's apparently the colors of the Guayaquil province in Ecuador. And they also, I believe it was last year or the year before, recently updated their federation logo. And on their flag, you'll notice that there's a condor on the top of the kind of symbol in the middle. And it had been a condor at the top of it, and it says FEF on the bottom and with their colors on it. They've updated it, which is almost to say they backdated it too, because it looks very kind of Art Deco in style, almost like LAFC's jerseys.
Right.
But it's kind of it says FEF, and if you know what you're looking for, you'll see it, but it's not like just straight out. And they also tried to design the top part with the F and the E. Yeah, there we go. There it is. It's supposed to look like a condor. So you have the condor kind of coming in, so they tried to kind of do it with that. But most interestingly, I think, is that the company that is producing these kits is not producing kits for any other team in the World Cup. The company is Marathon.
That's right.
They've been producing kits for Ecuador since 1994, and they are the only team for which they're producing World Cup kits this year. I don't know if they've got any contracts with other countries, but I found that interesting because I'd really never heard of Marathon before, and I thought they did a good job with them this year. Again, nothing flashy, but I think based on what else have you seen this year, they're certainly classy and kind of keep the theme going.
Well, that would explain why they don't look like crap. They weren't made by Nike, so
probably
exactly.
There's actual story and like history to the kit. That means that was made not by Nike. So.
That's very true.
It wasn't just something they threw against the wall.
Yeah.
That's unimpressive.
I've learned a ton tonight.
Mind blown, sir.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that we missed that you guys would like, either one of you would like to touch on?
Let me pull out my notes. No, I think I covered everything.
Yeah.
I'll just do the brief Ecuador, 5th grade science report, kind of quick fun facts. Quito, which is their capital, we think that playing at the Azteca is difficult. Quito is actually at 9,350 feet above sea level in the Andean Mountains. Okay. So they have a tremendous home field advantage when they play there. And, of course, Ecuador, they actually are on the equator. The equator does run through the northern part of the country. And they are the most biodiverse country per square mile in the world because they have the Pacific coast, they have the Andean Mountains kind of in the middle, and then the Amazon River starts on the eastern side of their country. Plus, they got the Galapagos Islands right off the coast. So they got a whole bunch of stuff going on there. I found that fact about Quito, though, being that high was
that's insane.
Shocking, actually, that they actually can try to play at that elevation and still breathe.
Well, knowing FIFA, they will award Ecuador the next World Cup after this, and everyone will have to play in that stadium. So
it'll just be a floating sportsplex for the next World Cup.
Oh man. Anything else, guys?
Good, man. Yeah.
Just thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for coming on. This won't be the last time, hopefully, that we see you. So, again, we're going to be doing kind of a group kickoff. We're not going to do every single match because that would just be insane, and Corey would kill us because he has to produce so many episodes.
He's behind the scenes right now.
I hate to bring it to him. I messed up. Yeah. I messed up and thought I was going to be here the rest of the week, and I'm not. So we were supposed to do another episode. So next week we have to do 3 episodes next week.
That sounds fun.
To keep pace with everything. But as we said before, Becca's going to be taking Germany.
And Japan. I've got 2 countries in the same group. So I'm helping you out.
Yeah, there's so many teams, and I should probably write all this down so I remember. And hey, there's a lot of other teams, Greg, if you want to take another one and come back on. But again, we'll kind of do episodes like this to kickstart the group off. And then when we get into the knockout stages, hopefully your teams will carry on and we'll have you back on to chat. Maybe not Qatar, but Germany possibly. We'll see how that goes. But I love this episode. I learned a lot, and I think it was good to talk about. And it's fun to learn about these countries, the players, and then the countries themselves, and then all types of scandals going on, everything like that. So this has been really, really cool. Thank you guys both for coming on and sharing what you have.
Moisex.
That's
that's the takeaway.
That's right.
Sex.
For no other reason do you watch Ecuador than just to watch his apparently.
I am watching every episode as soon as he gets the ball.
It's not an explicit episode is what's going to happen now.
And I did really good not cursing. So
I mean, it's taught in schools, right? I mean, it's not a bad.
Oh yeah.
Hold on a second. Is it this dude?
This is such good audio right now. If we're saying this dude and showing a picture.
Yeah, that's him.
Yes, that's him. That's the one.
Well, you should be watching this on YouTube. So
the last letter should be
right
an X, though. I think is that the spelling proper.
You'll have to blame Panini on this one.
Yeah, Panini got that one wrong. It seems.
Yeah.
So look at that right next door, Alan.
Such good radio.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll have to see. I think all the nations have until the 13th to finalize their roster. Right. I know the U.S. came out with theirs today, and that's going to be a whole other topic for next week. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if Alan Franco is legit in the squad. Hopefully, Moisex is in there for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll find out. But thank you guys so much. Yeah, for those that are listening, like and subscribe. We're going to be putting these on YouTube. So again, follow us there. And probably 3 episodes next week coming out, guys.
Poor Corey.
I know. It really is my bad. So, but thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll talk to you next week.